Hey everybody, welcome to the GenChurch Midweek Podcast, a podcast about everyday people who are committed to expanding God's family because of Jesus for generations to come. My name's Jon, I'm the engagement pastor here, and sitting next to me is Kyle Davies, our lead pastor, who found a whole stash of, Kyle, what even are those?
Candy, like the flavored Tootsie Rolls. No, they're
not even
fruit chews.
So they're not even good Tootsie Rolls.
No, they are the good Tootsie Rolls because the fruit is way better than the chocolate.
So it's healthy to eat it.
Yes, clearly.
So that's your excuse to eat the whole bag before we leave today, right?
I mean, if they're vegetable flavored, I'm certainly they would be better for you than the chocolate ones.
I'm pretty sure that says fruit on there. Kyle, you know fruit and vegetables aren't the same thing, right?
Yes, I do know that. But
Okay.
look,
I'm just clarifying for those at home, those
colors.
who are watching at home, they have to know that Kyle Davies knows the difference between fruits and vegetables.
But these are the fruit chews, so these are good for you, fill you up, right? We're rocking and rolling today.
Yeah, so for those of you at home, Kyle has now endorsed that candy is healthy for you just because it says fruit on it. I bet your kids will be so excited for that. If you had any kids that got our baskets, now you know if it says fruit on there, even if they wrote it themselves, it's healthy and they can eat as much as they want.
Clearly.
The kids are loving this.
Happy Halloween.
And the parents are hating this because now they get the sugar high. And
please show
have
this
fun,
to your
parents.
kids.
You get to enjoy corralling them. So, if you're joining us today, I'm excited that you are with us because we want to go on a journey with you of helping you grow in your everyday faith. And so that's what we're doing. We're going through the book of Mark together. Yep. And today we're in Mark 3, chapter 3, verse 7 through 19. So, Kyle, I'm going to go ahead and throw this over to you. Catch us up. Where are we at in the story? What's the context of what we're going through today?
So Jesus has been on the scene doing ministry for a little while, and we're picking up the story in Mark, and as Mark's compiling this right after what we talked about in our Sunday teaching. And so right at the end of Sunday's teaching, and really what it was primarily about was how the Herodians and the Pharisees were coming together and saying, we have to get rid of Jesus. So there's growing attention on Jesus. Two groups of people who were opposite each other does not like Jesus. They want to get rid of Jesus. And so what we're going to see is Mark begin to make the transition from just all these groups of people, these diverse responses to Jesus, and to really how does Jesus begin to react and respond to these responses to him.
Yeah, because what we see, like I like how you said it this weekend. I think it's really apparent. We'll see kind of a little bit today. Is Jesus is flipping upside down the cultural norms, which is pushing the society, and so it even takes two people that are complete at opposite ends of viewpoints and backgrounds of society. They can agree we don't like these cultural norms being pushed.
Yep, and so you have different groups of people that up to now are starting, as they're getting to know Jesus, deciding they don't like Jesus. And so that brings us into today's passage. So Jon, as we get into this, let's just go ahead and look at this. Man, as we get into this passage, is there anything that stands out to you as we read and look at Mark chapter 3 verses 7 through 19?
Man, I think one of the biggest things we see right here is we see Jesus bring together his 12 apostles.
Okay.
And the interesting thing is here so far in the book of Mark, I mean, we've seen 5 of these get called and invited to come and follow me. And now Jesus has this big old crowd following him, goes up to a mountaintop, and he has his 5 already, and he calls out the other 7 and invites them. And in my translation, it says he's appointing them and he's inviting them in and giving them authority to come and follow him in this journey.
So it seems like these guys are distinct from the larger crowd of people who are observing Jesus. So we've got two layers at this point. Is if you go a little earlier in the multitudes, you back up a little bit. It's just something I notice is that there's these large crowds, and they're coming from all the different regions: Jerusalem, Idumea, beyond the Jordan, Tyre, and Sidon. So you have groups of people who are coming from far away now, not just Galilee, to observe and encounter Jesus. And it's out of these larger groups that Jesus now is appointing that 12. So I guess, Jon, as we look at this, and are there any surprises in our passage today? Because one of the things is that as you make observations about the text, is there anything that would would catch the initial reader off guard, or maybe even for us today seems a little odd or surprising.
Yeah, I think if you go to 11 and 12, it gets a little interesting there when you see these unclean spirits. They see Jesus, they fall down before him, and they say, "You are the Son of God." And Jesus says to them to not make that known. And then we see a little bit here, a couple verses later, in Jesus talking about his appointment to his apostles, is that so they might be with him, that he might send them out to preach, and that they have authority to cast out unclean spirits, these demonic spirits.
Yeah. So here's this like little random fact that I don't know if as you're reading through Mark, the only other person who has rightly identified Jesus as the Son of God is God the Father. So up to this point, everybody else is like, Jesus, we're not sure we like you. We're a little confused by you.
We're not sure if we know exactly who you are.
God the Father says, "You are my son. I'm well pleased with you." And then demons say, "Hey, you're the Son of God. You're God in flesh. You're divine." And Jesus is like, "Stop. Like, quit telling people." So that is surprising.
I think I like the point that you make there, because we even talked about the Pharisees this past week. And the interesting thing about them is, like, they are the people that have been tracking along from the Old Testament. They're the Jews who have been watching the law, following the law, expecting this Messiah, and yet they can't even rightly identify the Son of God, and yet it is these unclean spirits that do.
And the unclean spirits, they're identifying this in the midst of this people. So it's not like Jesus off somewhere hidden with them when they say, "You're the Son of God." Yeah. The people are hearing this like in the presence of others. So two things that I really think as I'm looking at this passage is it points to the incompleteness of the disciples' knowledge, and two, it points to Jesus saying, "This is not quite ready for me to get who I am out there," in the sense of, remember, the Herodians and the Pharisees were already ready to kill him. So it's almost like he's trying to say, it's not quite time yet for me to die, because the disciples who have been with me don't even completely understand that. So it'd be premature for me to die. So that's how I see this initial contrast is you have the multitudes and then you have the few. And the multitudes, as they're observing Jesus, are hearing Jesus is the Son of God. But the disciples who are there with Jesus can't rightly understand that. So what's Jesus do is he almost backs off, comes to a mountain and says, "Okay, now I'm going to select 12 to be with me. Understand who I am. I'm going to send them out to say this and then live under my authority." So, I mean, that's what he says in those verses. And just one other observation that I make out of this is you have different groups of people from all over the countryside coming to see Jesus. And then when Jesus selects the group of people to truly begin to understand who he is, they're also from different locations from all over Israel. Few are from Galilee. A few, Judas was likely from Jerusalem. A couple of the other ones were likely from Tyre or Sidon or Samaria. And so you have some from Galilee. You have some who are down in Judea. Again, some of the background we don't completely know, but we know they're not all from the same location.
Yeah, I mean, it's unique in that, and it's even funny when we begin talking about, like, here at Generations, how we want to be a unique community that has people who come from different backgrounds, come from different places, different walks of life. Like, this is what Jesus is doing right here with the crowds in front of him. He is inviting people in who aren't just of one background, of one belief system. Like, he is inviting people who come from very different places, who have different stories and different walks of life. And I think one of the things that we learn about God when we look at this and we begin to rightly understand that is God wants us to personally know him. Like, I mean, look over here when Jesus says, "I want you to be with me. Follow me. I invite you in." And like, you see this, like the unclean spirits and the demons, they say, "You are the Son of God." And he goes, "You have that right. I don't want you sharing that message. I'm inviting in these apostles, these disciples, because I want them to personally experience, to learn, and to know that by being with me, I'm inviting them in.
And then turn around and sending them out to say that message. So it's not like he doesn't want that message to get out, but he's choosing to work through these individuals who are from all over Israel. And so I find that just so fascinating that we go from wanting this, all these observers. So two things. Yeah. People are observing Jesus from all these backgrounds, and then those whom he invites to have a more of an intentional relationship with is still a diverse group of people. Yes. It's not like he's like, okay, I'm only going to take, the people from Galilee with me this time. It's he's got several others with him from different areas to begin to spend time with. And from that, again, be with, send out to preach, and live under his authority to then cast out the very demons and maybe even hear some of the same things that they've already heard. Yeah. Mark's weaving together this beautiful story that's beginning to display and communicate the authority of Jesus, and not just the authority of Jesus from people standing on the periphery and hearing that Jesus is the Son of God, but people actually beginning to experience this sonship and the divine authority of Jesus and participating in that within the world.
Yeah, I think my only thing that I'd kind of push you and say, like, how, like, we learn a lot about who Jesus is. Okay. About what he wants us to know about. Like, he invites us into this personal relationship. He invites people from all over the place. Like, what do we begin to learn about humanity from this passage?
That we're thick. That we're thick.
You need to elaborate that.
Okay, so maybe thick's not the right word. So maybe we're a little dense at times. Maybe we're a little bit slow to truly comprehend who Jesus is. Okay. And that sometimes others, especially in the spiritual realm, have a better understanding of who Jesus is and his authority and role within the world than even we do. And so what I would say is probably what Mark is really trying to get his original readers to understand is that the disciples have been invited to go on a journey to discover what the demons already knew about Jesus. So it's to go from Jesus at a distance, at an observation, to begin to know him intimately. Yeah. So to go from that invitation, being invited to follow Jesus, to actually knowing him, and then not just knowing him, but being able to imitate him. Yeah. So because that's where the send out to speak and preach and the cast out demons is they're imitating what Jesus has already done. And so what we learn about humanity is that sometimes we can be a little slow to the party, but at the end of the day, we're to imitate Jesus. We're to know him, have that intimate relationship, but also imitate him. Yeah. And I know sometimes there's some pushback on that in our world of saying, well, we can't really do what Jesus did, or we're not sure. The old slogan is, what would Jesus do? And I think sometimes we speculate and we ask that open-ended question, but at the end of the day, well, let's look at what Jesus actually did, and let's start to do what he actually did. And as we start to do what Jesus actually did, and then we'll begin to, I think, see people who are freed from, frankly, the demonic forces, the things that oppress, the faulty understandings of who Jesus is begin to dissipate, and Jesus be made clear in our world.
Yeah. So how do we begin to bridge that gap then? Like you started off in saying sometimes we can be a little bit, in your words, thick or dense in that sense. But no, seriously, how do we begin to bridge that gap? If we as humanity, sometimes we, even another word you could use, sometimes we can be stubborn, but even to understanding the truth and then beginning to allow that to shape and grow our life. How do we begin to bridge that gap of what we see here into our everyday life?
Yeah. I think the most simple action for us is to see how Jesus transitioned from the crowds and all the awareness and opportunity that he had with the crowds to spending time with a few less people.
Yeah.
Now, I say that because I think for us as Christians, what we have to realize is sometimes we spread ourselves too thin. We try to befriend everybody. We're supposed to love everyone. So we're spending all of our time with so many people that we actually don't develop any depth.
Yeah.
And what happens is when you don't develop any depth, you're not actually able to challenge some of the faulty beliefs about Jesus and who he is and what he's like and how he would have us act. And so what Jesus does is, as he assesses the crowd, he retreats. In another passage of scripture, it talks about how Jesus prays all night about whom he shall select. Yeah. And so I think for us as Christians the principle here is to begin to invest in a few people to develop some depth with them, some true friendship, and to truly help them understand who Jesus is. But sometimes when we do that, we stop that and go, well, then we only do that with Christians. Well, that's not who Jesus is spending his time with. He's not spending his time with people who already understood who he was. He's spending his time with some people who had an okay understanding of who he was, but wanted to have a growing understanding of who he is. Yeah. So he invests in them to go beyond just the surface, to go deeper. And then what you actually see if we skip ahead in the story is the reason he starts to tell some parables is because he's really trying to help his disciples understand who he is and what he's about. And so for us, we need to start being with Jesus and asking, who are we supposed to be spending our time with? And as we look at our close relationships, some should be mature Christians. Some should be some Christians on about the same wavelength as us, come to that peer relationship. But then we need to have a few relationships with people who aren't followers of Jesus. Yeah. And so that we can show them what it looks like to go from initial invitation to intimacy to imitation of Jesus.
Yeah, I like how you begin to kind of flush that out because, I mean, I think you tangibly see Jesus have these relational spaces right here in this passage. Yeah. I mean, he has this kind of core group in which he has some of that intimate interactions with. Yeah. Where, I mean, you see him have some of his some of the guys that are a little bit closer to him, and Peter and James and John, who are kind of his tight-knit circle, who you'll see in some of the other passages who he'll specifically take those three to do stuff. Yeah. But then he has his wider 12 in which, I mean, he has that personal relationship with them. He's doing everyday life with them. Yeah. But then he also has some of that social sphere, which gets out a little bit further. Yeah. He's not spending every day, every hour with them, but I mean, they still get together. He still interacts with them. And I think something we even see later on is Jesus, doesn't just only deal with these 12 and only send out these 12. No, he, sends out 72 later on. Yes. And it's where are those 72? Well, they're still around. They're in his social space, but they're not. They might not be with him each and every day.
And the crazy thing is, if you start to think about the math on that, is if Jesus had 12 and he trained those pairs to have 12. So again, each pair is each pair. So that means there's 6 pairs, and it's 6 times 12. Isn't that 72? Did I do that math right?
No.
What's 6 times 12?
Actually, it is.
So I'm not crazy. I'm not
a
little
crazy. Bit, sometimes.
But if you think about, because that's what he does. He pairs them up. They're grouped there in pairs. So he teaches every pair to have an additional 12. And so if we think about that, it's as we begin to invest in people, the goal is to then say, hey, who is the chain of people that you are investing in? Yeah. So not get super ahead in our story too far to remove ourselves from this passage. What I think we see and what we learn about God is that he wants himself to be made known through the context of relationship. Yeah. At the core of that, and that's why Jesus invites these 12 guys to then speak a message and act under his authority.
Yeah. And I love how we begin to frame this up. This is something I'm passionate about because it kind of reminds me of the relational spaces we've talked about a little bit before, but at the very core of it, it's you with Jesus. It's you with God, Son, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. It's be with him. And it's out of that we have relationships with others.
Yeah.
We invite a few close people into our intimate space. We have some people in our personal space that we're doing dinner with regularly. We're having coffee. We're inviting them into our household. We have people in our social space that we see regularly, but it might not be an everyday thing. And we have people in our public space that we see around. But I love one of the things that you said is that not all of them are already believers. That some of them are intentionally people who come from different backgrounds, who have different beliefs. And I remember I was sitting down, I was having dinner with someone last week. I remember we were just having a conversation, and he made a comment to me about kind of like what he could do, like following this conversation. And I'm like, man, my encouragement is that you would go and have something similar with someone else. And he goes, what do you mean? I'm like, man, like I would sit down and I'd have dinner with you, regardless of if you came to Generations, regardless of if you said yes, you'd follow Jesus. If you completely pushed against following Jesus, pushed against coming to Generations, I would still love you and want to sit down and eat a burger with you. Yeah. Like it's when we begin to really embody that and say, hey, I'm going to live out and follow Jesus every day. And what it means here when it says preach, it doesn't just mean, hey, you get to stand up on Sunday and preach. No, like preaching is proclaiming the good news. Yeah. And that can just be in a conversation where you're sitting down at a dinner table in a restaurant, you're having burgers, you and someone else, and you're just talking about Jesus and you're proclaiming who he is and what he's done in your life.
So it's totally okay for you to start with exploration. Yeah. Like as the crowds. Yeah. So if you're hearing this and you're trying to figure out like, man, I'm not at the place where I'm ready to imitate Jesus, or I'm not quite ready, or I don't feel like the intimacy is there. Like it's okay to start with exploration.
Yes.
Like, and so just our pathway at Generations, I could have totally used this earlier, but it's like, it's okay to start with exploration and begin to then engage with Jesus, engage with us at Generations, with us, whether it's serving or participating in stuff like this, to then go from engagement to embody and to adopt that to as you engage with Jesus, as you engage with following God, to then say, okay, I am going to adopt the character and priorities, and I'm going to begin to live them out in my everyday life. And after you begin to embody them for a while, you will face opportunities to then extend that to someone else. And so that's what you see the pathway here is the crowds go from exploration, and out of the crowds, they go to engaging with Jesus, and out of engagement to Jesus, the disciples, these apostles begin to embody Jesus by doing some of the same things that he did. And in doing so, they're extending the good news that God is breaking into the world, that he has not forgotten his people, that they are not alone, and that life can be different. And he shows them how to truly be human because he loves them and he wants them to experience the freedom that comes from being in that relationship with him.
Yeah. And when we begin to do that, we will see the family of God expand for generations to come. Thanks for joining us this week on the GenChurch Midweek Podcast. We want to help make your faith an everyday faith. So interact with us each week as we continue to go through Mark. Hop online, go grab our discussion guide that we drop there each and every week so you can walk through Como with us as we do these each and every week. Drop us a question or a comment if there's something that stood out to you today, because we want to interact with you. We don't just want this to be Jon and Kyle throw everything out at you. No, throw some stuff back out at us. What stuff stood out to you? What surprises were there? What meanings did you take away? Or even what's the action or application in which God has called you to this week? Hope you'll join us next week on the GenChurch Midweek Podcast.